I'm going to be recording or interviewing a teacher on what is successful in her classroom with reading. And so hopefully you enjoy listening to her enthusiasm and sharing her experiences. What are the top 2 strategies or activities that you find successful with students? Mainly, I'm talking about reading.
Oh, there's so many. Okay. I would say probably number 1 is just kind of a general theory of literature class, but having a discussion-based literature class for sure. Something that I've done with that is always after every single chapter that's read in our novel units, kids are always going to be posed a discussion question of some kind. There's never going to be a day where we read a chapter, close our books, and do something else. So there's always discussion afterwards. And then something that I've also found that is super helpful is for those kids who really want to give a lot of like great theories or predictions about what's happening up in the text and what's going to be happening in the next chapter and all that. I provided them a Google document that is shared amongst all the kids. So obviously some beforehand kind of expectations are set on how to access the document, but the kids are then they're able to access the document and it's all shared, and they're able to share their thoughts and have discussions in there after class, either in study halls or if they have free times or during like a can-do time and if all their work is done, and then they're able to have conversations. So I've had kids who will sit in there and work for 20 minutes back and forth, debating about whether or not the character is going to make this decision in the next chapter or this other decision. So it brings in a lot of the discussion they've already had in class and extends it, and then also prepares them for the next class too, because then they're able to dive in with already their thoughts from the previous day with even more time spent in it. So
a follow-up question there is, what happens if you don't give them time to do discussion after reading a chapter?
The engagement is gone. There's no thinking that's happening. And also I don't have an opportunity to go in and actually like deepen their thinking as well too. So a lot of times the answers to the discussion questions that I've posed give me opportunity to see their thinking and see what they don't understand or what they need to deepen. So I'm able to pose follow-up questions that may be off the fly just because I'm familiar with the book so much. So a kid may say, oh, well, I think this character, is wrong for doing this, where I personally disagree with that greatly because I don't understand the character. So then I'll ask a follow-up question and it continues from there. So I think if there was no discussion in literature, there would not be a point to literature.
Oh, great point. Yeah. So you think we need to go beyond just reading?
Oh, yeah.
That it's about discussion if we're truly going to get kids to understand. Do you feel like you're making lifelong readers through that?
Oh, absolutely. I had a kid the other day when we were reading this book, and it's a little bit of a higher level of book than they're used to in 5th grade, but he said at one point, he goes, I think if I would have read this book on my own, I wouldn't have understood all of this. And I told him, I said, that's why we discuss. I said, that's why we stop and we pause and we think about what we're reading. So there'd be times where later in the book, they would be referencing something that happened way early in the book, and I would stop and go, wait a minute, this sounds familiar, let's find that. And so taking that time to show them how to stop and think through things and discuss is able for them not just to, oh, that was a fun story, but to go, whoa, the author intended all these different things throughout it.
So they're not really learning from you, they're learning from each other too.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Any other strategy that you've used that you think, oh, I've really gotten a lot from the kids because of this?
I think something that I've been doing a lot more this year as I've gotten more comfortable, in my 4th year teaching is I obviously plan my own literature units, but something that I've really been doing a lot is taking their pre-assessments at the beginning of the year and looking to see what strategies that they need to grow in, because it's easy to plan a literature unit and then to teach it the same every single year, but that's not beneficial to the kids. So for instance, at the beginning of this year, I gave an assessment and I noticed that some of the things that they were struggling with was nonfiction text, and then also identifying parts of words, so morphology within words. So the beauty of planning your own unit is it's so flexible and easy. It's not you're following a curriculum that, has this, and this you have to hit. It's, okay, now that I know that the kids need more instruction with morphology or need more instruction with nonfiction, this week I'm going to pull in a lot more nonfiction text that's connected to the novel. Or this week we're going to, throughout the entire unit, we're going to focus on morphology and, break apart words. And I'm going to stop and point out words that I see with prefixes and suffixes and all of that. So it's very flexible with what you get to do.
So when you teach morphology, let's go back to it. So how do you like emphasize it as you're reading?
So normally what I would do is I would come across like a word, and a lot of times like there would be I did a pre-unit with it. So I taught Greek and Latin roots with things, and I still went in and I taught like what the prefixes were. Yeah. I taught what prefixes were, what suffixes were, what Greek and Latin roots were through a project that we created these like creatures with them. And then once they're familiar with all of that vocabulary and everything, then it was more of a reinforcement of that. So they had like a foldable that had the prefixes, the suffixes, and the roots. And sometimes we would have those out during class and just have them off to the side. And sometimes during class I would stop and I would go, hey, that looks familiar. This word has, I noticed the root in it is this. So I wonder, is this part, like, and I'll just stop and do think aloud. So a lot of times kids would help me with that as well too. And so we'd use context clues as well, but it's kind of a focus and a point out. And I do a lot of think alouds at the beginning. And then slowly as we started to move through the book, it was more of they would start to notice and they would start to point on things and they would start to reflect on those. So
how has morphology helped you with your students to deepen their understanding as they're reading a book?
Well, because the one book that we've been reading is has a lot of very like higher level like vocabulary words, even ones that I hadn't recognized. Is The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle is the book that we're reading. And so it has a lot of like ship terminology, and it's set in the 1800s. So they use a lot of like, bigger vocabulary words and things. And so even for me, myself, I would tell them, hey, some of these words are difficult. So that's been really helpful because I think that it was such a need during that time for them to like go in and really focus on those and deepen their understanding, because without that, there would have been parts they would have been lost with because of how much rich vocabulary there was, which was rich. It wasn't bad. It wasn't confusing. It was great vocabulary. So it gave them those tools to kind of break it apart and understand context.
Do you find that your kids like almost want to give up if they see a word that's too long?
Sometimes, yeah. Or they'll just instantly ask, what does that mean?
Okay.
And then it's a re-guiding of, okay, if you don't know what that means, what tools do we have in our back pocket? Because and even if it's not morphology, using context clues of going, okay, he's scowling while he said this, and there's an exclamation point at the end. So it doesn't sound happy, right? And so we kind of use those tools that we have in our back pocket.
So you're making them analyze a text then?
Because if I just went in and said, oh, this word means this, then it's not really helping them. It's just, I'm their little dictionary.
Oh, great point.
Yeah.
Great point. And that's what I think teachers do, especially in upper grade, is that's why they read books and they don't really teach a skill. It's still in upper grade. We need them to be teaching skills also. Yeah. Perfect. Okay, my next question is, what's your favorite part of teaching literature books to students? And can you tie a success story to that?
Okay, favorite part of teaching literature books to students. I mean, seeing the growth is a huge thing. I think sometimes kids will come into my class getting a little like fatigued. I think 5th grade is kind of the year where they start to get more freedom. They start to get more, like sometimes they get cell phones. Sometimes they get also like unrestricted access to anything. They can play video games a lot. They can do all these things. And so a love for reading can either start to like grow as a flame or can kind of start to die out. So I really take that as like a challenge year of, I remember when I got into like, I think 6th, 7th grade is when I got an iPod and I started to read less. And so I feel like that's kind of a pivotal year. So I really take it as a challenge of like, okay, how can I keep this flame lit and keep it growing? So that's been huge. I think that's one of my favorite things is seeing like how kids can come into 5th grade and realize that now in 5th grade, the door is so much more open for such rich literature that they can engage with. And it's not books that are, kind of like, okay, learning to read. It is now, okay, how can we really dive deep into this? So that's been huge.
That's a great point.
Yeah, which I love. And it's my favorite. So I have one success story that I absolutely love. There's a few things I can think of, but I just remember, I think it was last year, I had a student who came in and he was known to be kind of a little bit of a struggling reader. He was not interested in reading very much. He came into my classes, but something about like the beginning of the year kind of sparked a little bit with him. And something that I really have been focusing on implementing in the last couple of years is really being like a book whisperer in my classroom. And so a lot of the books in my library I have read myself. And it surprises the kids because they'll bring it to me or they'll pick it out and I see them holding it and I go, oh, that's an excellent book. And they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, yeah, I read that book. I love that. What part are you at? And even if I've only read it once years ago, them knowing that I've read it and me being like, oh, does that part happen next is huge for them. So this boy came in and he was trying to decide what to read. It was a silent reading time. And I have a section in my library that is my recommended books. And he was kind of perusing through there. And I asked him, I said, what kind of books do you like to read? Like, do you like this, this, and this? And he was like, I don't know. And he's like, well, and he mentioned how he kind of liked, he kind of teased at adventure. And so I pulled out Hatchet. And I said, okay, I said, I want you to know this. I said, I read this book as a kid. And then I reread it. And I reread it. I said, I've probably read this book 6 times. I said, this is one of my favorite books. I said, because it's so hard to put down. So he, okay, and he takes it back to his desk and he starts reading Hatchet. And I think it was over the next couple days that he finished it. And he goes, that was really good. Do you have any more like that? And so then he kind of goes, I kind of like fantasy a little bit. And I said, okay. So then I pulled out a bunch of different books. And then pretty soon he starts talking to the other kids who are really into fantasy as well too. And then pretty soon I see him with, I think it was Harry Potter. He started reading Harry Potter and there was a community of boys in my class who loved Harry Potter. So he started reading Harry Potter and then he got to have conversations with other boys with that. And I was like, okay, cool. Then pretty soon he's like, I think I want to read, he's like, I really like the action. And he goes, I think I want to read The Hunger Games. And that's a young adult book in our library. So I was like, do you have the permission slip signed? He's like, yeah, I do. And I said, okay. And so he went to the library and got Hunger Games. I've read all those. And so I said, isn't it? He devoured those. Pretty soon he goes, I think I want to read the Maze Runner books. I said, I've never, and now he's on to books that no one has read in my class. And he said, I think I want to read these. And I said, amazing. Tell me how they are. So at the beginning of the year assessment, he was in like the almost intervention scale where he was like, okay, I have never in all of my years of teaching, not many, but 4, all my years of teaching, I have never seen scores shoot so high off, like grow so quickly at such a quick speed than I did with him. And so we had 2 separate classes. We had a non-grade level reading class, which was awesome. Then we had a more like accelerated class. I moved him to it because I said, you are getting this and you are ready for this. And he seriously went like skyrocketed off the scale. And I was not doing these big, intervention times with him and sitting there and making him fill out these packets and making him do all this homework and all these things to take home. It was truly every time he had free time, he had a nose in a book. And his scores skyrocketed. So that was like the coolest thing just from me as a teacher, but then also his parents were just like over the moon. They're like, yeah, suddenly like because you had read this and then other boys had read those and then you had read that other one, he just is like, boom, this massive reader. And that was a flame that was very, very low. There was a little glow there. There was not much of a spark going on when he came in. And then it was basically a roaring fire by the time he left. So
I'm going to reiterate a couple things that I want everyone to think about what you said. First of all, you're a reader. And so when a kid wants to read and you've told them you've read, there's something about that that changes. So teachers, if you're listening, your homeschool parents, you've got to read the books because you have to be able to say, oh, I've read that. Here's what's going to happen, or it's going to be exciting. The other thing you brought into is he started to talk about books with other people besides you.
Yeah.
And then you brought out something that I want to really reiterate is there was not a lot of packets for intervention. You're right. The reading was the intervention.
Yeah.
We have got to get kids back into books more. We're not doing that, and there's our big mistake. So.
And it's so, also, it seems like the easy way out.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, it's so easy compared to these other things, but sometimes during parent conferences...
Do you think people think it's too easy and that can't possibly be the way we make kids read by reading?
Yeah, sometimes during parent conferences, I'll sit down with the parents and they'll be like, hey, there are vocabulary scores and things like this are lower, or their spelling or those kind of things. And I go, I know it sounds like such a cheap answer, but it's really not. I said, the more they are in books, the more they are reading, the more they engage with the literature that they read, they're more aware of how words are spelled, they're more aware of vocabulary, they're building their skills just from their independent reading. But that's got to be sparked from somewhere. It can't just be, I'm assigning you these books that I've never read, will never discuss with you, and don't care about. It's the passion that sparks it and grows it. So
I'm going to bring up something that Brooke and I have talked about, and I wanted to reiterate. So she just talked about writing and spelling. Just doing those in isolation doesn't really make a kid want to be a writer or a better speller. But she does something that kids are writing all the time. So you mentioned it a little bit, but go back to your discussion threads.
Yeah.
What do those look like in your classroom?
So it's funny because one of my classes that I teach, so I teach 2 classes, 2 reading classes, and it's funny because the one class is the on-grade level class. The one other class is accelerated based on kind of test scores and all those things being of the year. And it's funny because I actually find that this strategy has been huge for the on-grade level kids, which has been amazing because the accelerated class, the class that's a little faster pace, they're so knowledgeable of books that it's not this... They love the book, but it's not this new discovery to them when these big twists and turns happen. But for the on-grade level class, it is all of a sudden, whoa, I did not know reading could be like this. So especially my on-grade level class, they're the chattiest class. They want to talk about the book all class long.
That's fun.
They go, no, when class is over, right? And so I noticed that a lot of them, we just only have a limited amount of time. We can't talk about the book all day, and that's the saddest thing I'll ever say about teaching. But there are some days where, I'm like, you know what? And I will toss the worksheet I had that day sometimes. I'm going to be honest. I will say, you know what? No, we're going to discuss more. This is more beneficial to them. But there is some times where they really want to talk about things and want to continue the conversation. So I created this document. I did a PD over the summer where it was talking about how to extend kids' discussion past class time. So having like a Google document or something that they can continue some sort of interaction with what happened in class or giving ideas or whatever. So I started to think about it when it came to literature class because there's only so much time we have for discussion. So I created this document called The Conversation Continues, and it's a shared Google document that all the kids access. And so I have notes on there that I can see every edit on it. So they have to make sure they're doing exactly what they're supposed to, or they won't be able to participate. And then my requirement is all I have is just a table with rows. And I say, if you want to start a new discussion, go into the next row and add a new topic there and ask a question or mention a comment or give a theory about something you think is going to happen. Because that's the big thing they love. They go, I have a theory. And often I stop them in class because it can more spiral into just their thinking and it's not text-based. So I tell them, I say, if you have a theory, go put it in this conversation continues. And then they're all able to access it. So they all comment on each other's as well too. So they change their font color and then they're able to discuss back and forth. And I found there were some days during like a study hall that these kids, it was not a must-do thing they had to do. It was a can-do when they were done. There were other things they could work on. I had kids who, again, on the on-grade level, or kids who are maybe struggling readers, who sat there for 25 minutes and would back and forth. Oh, I agree with what you said. I absolutely loved how you said that. I think maybe that, I wonder why they did this. And the other kid would go, oh yeah, I wonder that too, because I think, and that's happened numerous times. And this document is now 20 pages long. Wow. And it's continuing to grow. And kids in class will talk about it, where they will go, oh, I can't wait for the conversation continues. I have to get to that tonight, like to later when I'm like in study hall, because I have so much more to say.
When do you hear kids say, I got to go write more?
Yeah, right? Yeah. It's amazing. So they look forward to that as well too. Good. And interacting with each other. And then it also gives opportunity for the kids from different classes to interact with each other as well. So I have kids who are very high accelerated readers having deep discussions with kids who are in intervention levels. And they're both talking to each other in the same kind of manner because they're both excited about the book. So it's been,
So I have found as a teacher, some of my low readers had very deep thinking. They weren't able to articulate it on paper. Yeah. But once you could let them talk, so even that discussion thread, their thread might be not quite as deep in writing, but it's still deep. How exciting.
And even like sometimes I'd find too, after the discussion thread, they would come in the next day and I've seen their thinking has deepened. And they're able to like even discuss the things they noticed before. They have referenced it. They're like, oh, I remember I said this in the conversation continues, or this kid said this in the conversation continues in our in-class discussion.
Awesome.
So it's like preparing them for class, but also extending from class.
Ooh,
so.
Love that. I'm seeing students and test scores that kids are not reading. They're not actually doing well in math either, but we're going to talk about reading tonight. So do you have any ideas why kids aren't reading and why aren't really progressing? We've talked about how you've gotten kids to progress, but what's happening that the majority of the kids in the United States aren't reading, especially at 4th, 5th grade level?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a myriad of things that all play into that. I think the easy answer is culture, I think, as well too. Okay. I think there's a abundance of freedom in how kids spend their time. There's a lot of distractions and a lot of different things that are easier and quicker for them to, obtain that dopamine. I also think too, like I've seen as a teacher in a classroom, there are kids who do have freedom for these, being able to play these games and do all these things and have a phone, who are still excited about reading. So I don't think that's just an excuse that can be thrown out there to blanket everything as why kids are not reading. I think two of the things, the biggest thing is that I think even teachers aren't reading. I think now we have teachers who are coming in who are young, and which is awesome, and I'm glad that they're passionate about that, but I do think that their books of knowledge are very sparse and they're not excited about reading. And so how are the kids going to get excited? Like I said before, like having those conversations with kids and saying, yes, I've read that book and I loved it. Do you know this part when they get here? Is life-changing for them. I always reference the book Whisperer, because she talks about how her entire literature class is set around reading, just spending time in books, being lost in the world of these books, and being the person who knows these books, writes about these books, responds to these kids. So I think that's huge. I think, again, just teachers not reading is a big issue, because then how are you going to spark the excitement? I think the other thing too is, which also is connected to that, is there's so much reliance on curriculum, and there's so much reliance on just purchasing something or using what the school has given you, that doesn't build excitement, because it is, you're flipping open to a page, you're reading through it, the kids know that you're flipping open to a page, reading through it, and the kids before have done the same thing, the kids after are going to do the exact same thing. And it's not catered to them. It's not playing into what they need to build. It's not bringing any excitement, because you're not there to bring the excitement, because to be honest, teaching from a textbook is not fun. Teaching from curriculum is often not enjoyable. And so I've used curriculum to get some great ideas for different strategies and things. But I think there's a huge heavy reliance on that, because I think the baseline of creating a unit and creating a novel unit and a novel study for your students is a lost art that really needs to be focused on. And so I think the engagement and the excitement towards literature really just starts to kind of fizzle out when you're relying, number one, not on novels, and number two, on, packets and curriculum.
So I'm going to deepen you in that, because I do think you've hit something. So when you plan a unit, how does it change from using just curriculum?
Like
when you plan a literature unit, and instead of just using someone's curriculum they gave you, how does that change you when you're teaching it?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's so much more ownership of it. I think that's the biggest thing, because I've told my kids straight to their face, I tell them, if I'm not excited to teach you, I know I need to change the lesson.
So are you saying that you create excitement as you're planning?
Yeah.
Because you're thinking about your kids.
Because there's ownership of it too, and it's not, okay, this is the lesson we're doing today. Oh man, I know exactly what I'm doing, because I know with the kids in mind what they need to do. And so everything that I'm teaching, I know what's coming next. I know what the end goal is. And so there's so much more ownership for me as a teacher, and I've created it. And then again, if there's things that I find that are not engaging or things that are boring, then I can change it and I can adjust it, and I can, okay, if it's a discussion, if it's a response to something on a piece of paper, and I know that the kids are not going to enjoy that day, and it's just going to be and they're not going to be able to focus, then it's going to be getting up out of your seat, finding someone and walking around the room and discussing it. you know, there's flexibility, and there's also ways to target their needs.
So you're saying that you don't always have to have learning with a paper.
Yes.
So tell me what
Pretty
you
much.
think about papers. Because people say, oh, we just want fun and we don't want any to do worksheets or paper. What do you think?
I feel like the longer I've been teaching, the less papers I've given. And it's weird because it's felt as I've gone through like, oh man, like, you know, is there more? But the kids are so much more engaged. They're so much more apt to discuss things with each other, to get up, to walk around, to split the room, choose a side. Are you on the captain's side or the crew's side? I want you to debate each other. Why? Rather than, okay, fill out this paper, list 3 reasons as to why. You know, like there's so much more to it than just getting their paper on, or getting their pencil on paper. And that's valuable. I think that there are exit tickets and things that you should be seeing that is tangible for you to assess as well. But I found that the longer I'm there, it's more of, okay, how am I engaging their thinking and how am I getting them engaged with what we're talking about, rather than how am I getting an assignment
So
done.
someone listening to this would go, then how do you ever know if your kids really learned? Besides, oh, they just read a lot and wait till the end of the year test. How do you know in a unit that your kids have learned something? What are you doing to sort of check for understanding or assess?
So I think like a lot of times you're constantly circling the classroom as well too. So if there's discussion going on and there's thinking that's like, okay, there's a very informal way of assessing. There's also ways of like handouts of, you know, like if you, like I did the other day, it's talking about character traits within the character. We discussed it for a while, and then it was a quick 5-minute assignment that was, okay, here, I want you to like write in here, what is this character showing? I want you to choose any character now. I want you to cite evidence. I want you to explain why. And because we had spent so much time building to that through working together, talking with their partners, getting up, moving around, that was easy for them. They had it done. So it wasn't a fill out this packet to figure out this character's character traits. It's find these ways to engage with this, and then here's this quick thing. So there are ways that you can assess them still and still have tangible documents and see, and you still can give a quiz on those things. You still can grade those things as well too, but that's not your way of teaching. It's your way of assessing. It's your way. It doesn't have to be your way of, okay, fill out
So
this.
do you feel like you know that your kids have learned?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because then when they get to the end assessment, I do not have every kid, you know, raising their hand asking what I'm doing. I do not have every kid, you know, being like, wait, what am I doing? Wait, what? They know exactly what they're doing. And I've built them to that.
So I want to reiterate, because I do think you got a great point of what's probably wrong, is you're not waiting to the very end to see if they've learned it.
Oh, absolutely not.
And I do think that's part of the problem right now in classrooms. We're waiting too much to the end, or we're just testing every week. And I'm like, testing, what does testing really do for us?
Yeah. Well, and I even explained this to some teachers I was kind of mentoring. I talked to them about it, and I said, you should have the end ready and done. And I said, and obviously you can tweak things as well too. You know, we had fires here, and so we missed a couple of days of instruction. And so I needed to adjust some things. That happens. But you know where they're going. And so I said, you got to think of it like this. The end assessment is here. How can you break apart that into chunks that they can actually digest and do week by week? So for instance, at the end of this unit, they're doing like a slideshow, and there's 4 sections that they're filling in with cited evidence in each one. We have been building our cited evidence and using our text to support our findings through our previous novels. So they already have that. But then each week we've been talking about each of those sections. So one is on the depth and complexity on big idea. So we do that for 1 week. We focus on that through all of our discussion. Another one is on change over time. Boom, that's another focus. So each time, by the time they get to this end unit, they go, I have done all of this. Now I'm focusing on 1 chapter. Done. And they're able to do it. So each time, each week, I'm checking and I'm going, okay, that section, check mark, done. They've got that done of the final assessment. But I always have that in mind at the end.
So you have the end in mind.
Always.
Awesome.
You can't get in a car and start driving somewhere with you don't know where you're going.
Excellent point. Excellent point. That was great.
Yeah,
Loved
you're
it.
welcome.